Welcome to the Ames Public Library, both in person and virtually, for Water Quality in Story County, a program brought to you through a partnership with Outdoor Alliance, Prairie Rivers of Iowa, and Ames Public Library. I'm Clelia, an Adult Services Librarian here. The library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programming like tonight's event. For those of you with us on Zoom, please submit your questions via the chat function, which you should find a link to at the bottom of your screen. I will be monitoring the chat to make sure your questions get shared with our speaker when it is time. If you get bumped out of the Zoom meeting, please follow the original link to get back to us. And for all participants, today's session is being recorded and will be posted to the Ames Public Library's YouTube channel after the event. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. If you're with us live, we will come around with a microphone for you to ask your question. With that, I'll hand things off to Bruce.
Thank you, Cleo. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce White. I'm one of the board members from the Outdoor Alliance of Story County. And on behalf of the Outdoor Alliance, I want to welcome you here this evening on this at least foggy night, and it's not 20 below zero, so we have small blessings, I guess. We appreciate your participation in this winter presentation. This has been a tradition with the Outdoor Alliance for the last several years to sponsor two or three presentations each winter about some different outdoor topic. And we appreciate the assistance that we are provided by the Ames Public Library and their staff, and the opportunity to offer this on Zoom for those who may not be able to be with us in person tonight. This evening's program will address the question, what is the condition of lakes, rivers, and streams here in Story County? And Dan Haug is the water quality specialist for the Prairie Rivers of Iowa, which is a local nonprofit headquartered here in Ames. He'll be sharing his findings from the fourth year of a locally led water monitoring program that includes volunteers, Story County Conservation, and laboratory support from the City of Ames to look at what our condition of our streams and lakes are here locally. I think already, as Julia said, we'll have some Q&A at the end of Dan's presentation. She already went over the housekeeping, but a little bit more about Dan's background. In addition to collecting and samples and making sense of the data from the Story County Water Monitoring Program, Dan has worked on projects to install watershed and creek signs, clean up creeks, create educational videos, identify conservation opportunities with GIS mapping. He studied water resources management at the University of Wisconsin before returning to his hometown here in Ames back in 2017. So help me welcome Dan Haug of this evening's presentation, What is the Condition of Lakes, Rivers, and Streams in Story County?
Thank you. I'm Dan Haug. So I want to share with you 4 lessons from the last 4 years of water monitoring in Story County. I can see some of you in the audience who have been doing water monitoring in Story County for a lot longer than that, but it's been 4 years since we kind of got our act together locally and took over from Iowa DNR after the Iowa Water volunteer monitoring program was canceled, and they kind of told us that we needed to have a local leadership if we wanted to keep things going. And so we were able to pull together some partnerships and local leadership to make that happen. We're in the 3rd week of January, and I was still getting data in the 2nd week of January. So I'll be sharing a little bit of this year's findings, but it's mostly a broader overview of what we've learned over the past 4 years. And so this is a program with a lot of moving parts. So we have a robust volunteer program that is organized by Story County Conservation, which provides volunteers with kits and with sites to do chemical monitoring, so testing nitrate, phosphorus, chloride, transparency, dissolved oxygen with test strips and vials. Some volunteers are also doing biological monitoring, surveying aquatic invertebrates. And have some metrics from this year. We had 49 volunteers participate this last year. They're monitoring 58 sites, and 20 of those were tested at least 20 times, so twice a month. So we're really seeing that scale up and more consistent monitoring, which means the quality of the data is getting better. And we had 969 data sheets entered into the Clean Water Hub. So we are grateful for the Isaac Walton League for putting together a database where volunteers can enter their data and get some visualizations. So that's all increased from previous years. But that's not the only piece of the program. We also do regular lab testing. So the City of Ames Water Pollution Control Department has a laboratory that tests effluent from the wastewater treatment plant and tests above and below. I guess they have 3 sites on the South Skunk River, 1 upstream, 2 downstream of the wastewater treatment plant that they have tested weekly since 2003. Real treasure trove of data that we didn't know was out there until we started talking to each other and discussing who was doing what in the county. And to that, we have added 15 sites around the county that we monitor monthly. So Rick and I will go out there. We have some City of Ames staff that will go out once a month, collect water samples, take them back to the lab, test them for bacteria, nitrate, total phosphorus, and total suspended solids. And then there are 3 real-time nitrate sensors deployed in the county. We don't have anything to do with that, but I do watch those sensors and make good use of the data. So there's one on Iowa Creek in Ames that's was installed by the University of Iowa, and then 2 installed by the USDA on Walnut Creek near Kelly. And so those are really handy to be watching what happens after it rains. How does nitrate change over the course of the season? Get really detailed information. But all this data isn't much good if nobody looks at it. And that is what we were finding, is that there was a lot of data we were sitting on that wasn't really getting a lot of attention. And there's a reason for that. It's really, really hard to do. So, I work with 4 or 5 different databases. And so this is data from the Clean Water Hub, the volunteer monitoring platform. So it'll spit out, a table with 30 to 50, columns in no particular order, and then the site information is in a different table, so you've got to join that. The approach that I use is writing computer code with the statistical programming language R, which is, it takes a lot more time to do it the first time, but then it's a lot quicker the second, third, fourth, fifth time you do it. And then I can use that to get things into a little bit nicer format to be able to review the data. And then there's another route of code to make graphs and visualize that data. So, it's challenging, which is why I think water monitoring doesn't get as much use as it should. But we do have a lot of data out there that we can learn a lot from. And that is what I want to share with you tonight. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our financial support. So some of my time is paid for through a contract with Story County and the City of Ames. We also have support from the Soil and Water Conservation District, and we've received support both for water testing supplies and for my time from the Outdoor Alliance. We had help getting going from cities of Nevada and Huxley, from the Story County Community Foundation, and from the Leopold Center. So thank you, everyone. I should also mention that Prairie Rivers of Iowa is a 501c3 nonprofit. We do gratefully accept donations. That's what keeps us going. So in addition to supporting the Outdoor Alliance, please support us as well. We do education, work on water quality and pollinators. We support small towns, historic preservation along the Lincoln Highway, Heritage Byway, and the Iowa Valley Scenic Byway. Okay, so what have we learned from this locally led water monitoring program? Lesson number 1: water pollution is highly dependent on the weather. Everyone knows this, but I think it's easy to forget just how important this is. Here is a field near Roland that is normally dry, but during a torrential rainstorm in spring of 2022 turned into a little river, and you can see it's pretty muddy. And what this means is that if you're measuring total suspended solids, which is a measure of soil erosion and deposition, there was 1 month this year where Total suspended solids at pretty much every stream we measured was off the charts, 300, 400, 500 milligrams per liter. And then the rest of the year, it was, 20 or 30 milligrams per liter. So it just kind of shows you the importance of timing for water pollution. Here is a little creek near Ames High School that gets receives stormwater runoff from my neighborhood and many others in North Ames. So normally a trickle, but you get a heavy rain, water hits the pavement, and it turns into this torrent. So there's a lot of stuff getting washed off the pavement, dog dew, road salts, potentially lawn fertilizer. And then, of course, the force of that water is eroding this stream bank and carrying a lot of sediment. So, those big rainstorms are really drive a lot of water quality pollution, both in rural areas and in urban areas. And we've seen that. So in Iowa Creek, just downstream of this little tributary, we measured in June and in July, and then in between that, we caught a sample from a storm event. And so sediments, E. coli, and total phosphorus both went up by a factor of 10 during that storm event. Nitrate was the exception. There seemed to be a dilution kind of a thing happening here, that it was lower during the storm event. And in general, we've seen lower nitrate in our urban creeks. So if people are talking about lawn fertilizer, you might be barking up the wrong tree. But this, the influence of weather is really important because we had the misfortune to start a locally led water monitoring program during a drought. And so, spring of 2020, spring of 2022 were wetter, but most of this period has been drier than usual, moderate to severe drought. We're currently, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor, Story County is currently in severe drought. So, this means that if you're curious about non-point source pollution from agriculture and rural land, and you're curious about what benefits conservation practices are having, you're not going to see that if you're monitoring during a drought. So we do volunteer snapshot events every May, and so comparing, there was much less difference between sites during a dry spring than in a normal spring. One of these sites is below a crepe wetland. During the dry spring, it looks the same as the others. They're all pretty clear. But during a normal spring, you can see the benefit. Lower nitrate in that stream. Also lower nitrate in College Creek, which is mostly urban. So it really matters the timing of things. And so a lot of what I've been doing with these reports is trying to tease things out by stream flow and weather conditions so that we can compare apples to apples and figure out what kinds of pollution are we looking at. So the exception to this, where we do see water pollution during drought is downstream of wastewater treatment plants. So here's one of our volunteer sites in Ballard Creek. It is just downstream of the Huxley wastewater treatment plants. And during the summer, fall, winter this year, they were regularly seeing phosphorus between 5 and 10 milligrams per liter. Chloride between 300 and 700 milligrams per liter. So I think that this is probably water softener. Water softeners produce a lot of salts as a byproduct, and that ends up in wastewater treatment systems, and you can't really remove it. So lesson number 2, wastewater treatment plants don't treat everything. So I've really gotten to learn a lot about wastewater treatment the past year, partly because I've been doing a weekly video series about the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. And so I've been doing a lot of reading NPDES permits and learning all the details of the regulation. And also because we have a group that meets regularly to figure out what we're going to do with water monitoring. And that includes some folks from municipal who work on municipal water and wastewater in Ames, Gilbert, Roland, Nevada. And so at one of our meetings, we got to tour the Gilbert sewage treatment lagoons. And so there's more than one way to do this, but what they do here in Nevada is they've got a series of lagoons that slows the water down long enough so that the solids can settle out, and they have all these booms that pump that aerate the water so that and that provides suitable conditions for microbes that can break down the organic matter in the sewage, just like you'd aerate a compost pile to have it decompose faster. And if you don't do that in the lagoon or the wastewater treatment plant, it's going to happen in the creek. Bacteria is going to be breaking down the organic matter, and that consumes the oxygen, that kills the fish. So that was one of the big water quality issues, in the 1970s when the Clean Water Act was passed, and that was kind of one of the main focus of wastewater treatment. And so we've seen a big improvements in dissolved oxygen in fisheries as a result of that. But there's a lot of things that process doesn't filter out, including pathogens. And E. coli is the indicator that we test for. It's just recently in the past decade that wastewater treatment systems in Story County have started doing UV disinfection. So the effluent is run through a bank of ultraviolet lights that sterilize or inactivate the microbes. And does a pretty good job of killing whatever gets through the process. So I've been looking through a lot of wastewater permits, and kind of what I found is the typical thing that you'll see in every system, even the smallest towns. They're required to treat for suspended solids, so getting rid of the sediment and getting the water clearer. They're required to treat for biological oxygen demand, so decomposing the organic matter that would use up the oxygen in the stream, getting rid of ammonia, which is a form of nitrogen that's toxic to fish, and then balancing the pH or acidity. But it's much more variable with these other things. So E. coli bacteria, City of Ames just installed UV disinfection to treat for that in 2015, Gilbert in 2019. Nevada hasn't done it yet. Their new plant will be done, I think, next year, and we'll have that. Chloride, so I know like a neighborhood scale wastewater treatment plant, the Squaw Valley neighborhood, was just required to switch their water source so they wouldn't have to use water softeners to get their chloride down. Nitrogen and phosphorus, bigger communities are being required to treat for those as part of the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy, but a lot of those won't. Like City of Ames, I think is going to get phased in several stages over the next 5 years or so. So there's still a lot of things that aren't adequately treated by wastewater treatment plants that can come out the other end. So, for example, phosphorus. If I've tested upstream and downstream of the Ames Water Pollution Control Facility, they average 3.8 milligrams per liter total phosphorus in the effluent, and so you can double phosphorus downstream of there. And that's especially the case in drier conditions when the effluent is less diluted. And we have, great data set here. City of Ames tests their effluent, tests 3 sites on the South Skunk River weekly. And so I was able to crunch the numbers there and figure out how much of the water in the river is coming from treated effluent. And so as the rivers dry up, a larger fraction of the water in the stream is effluent, and phosphorus rises to approach the level that's in the effluent. You also see a spike on the other side, when you have big storm events. Most of the water in the stream is coming from the watershed, and sediment is getting washed in from fields and eroded from stream banks. Another thing we just learned this year, we'd been testing upstream and downstream of Nevada in West Indian Creek, partly curious about some new they were doing some erosion control practices, and we were hoping to see the benefit of that. But we were seeing really high phosphorus, really high E. coli at Janet Heritage area downstream in Nevada. And so eventually I got a sample of the treated effluent, and its E. coli was 48,000. The standard is 235. So most of the E. coli in this stream was coming from that wastewater treatment plant. Now, the good news is that they're building a new plant, so they're going to fix this. The other good news is that there's not a lot of people using the stream downstream of Nevada. So, but this kind of shows you that like this nobody was thinking about this. You kind of assume that, point sources are regulated and DNR must be taking care of it, and not always the case. So lesson 3, as we can see, we have some E. coli problems in our stream. And so I've learned that the impaired waters list is the tip of a very dirty iceberg. One of the benefits of this program is that we're able to test a lot of creeks that the Iowa DNR doesn't have the resources to do. So they test the South Skunk River near Cambridge, downstream of the Ames wastewater treatment plant. And that they have a record going back a long time. So the South Skunk River was on the impaired list, but most of the other rivers and creeks in Story County had never been assessed for recreation. So we were able to do that. And this year, kind of the headline number is that 1 out of 12 sites that we monitored that had enough data met the primary contact recreation standard. We also had 3 that exceeded the secondary contact recreation standard. So Iowa Creek, Ballard Creek, and West Indian Creek. I think this was a particularly bad year, but this has been pretty typical that only the stretch of the South Skunk River immediately upstream of Ames meets the standards. Beaches are tested more regularly, and there's maybe some of you subscribe to Iowa Environmental Council's Water Watch newsletter. They give regular updates from DNR beach monitoring. So we have 2 county-managed beaches in Story County. Hickory Grove met the standard 10 out of the 15 weeks during the summer. So Hickory Grove, there's been a lot of work done to clean up that lake, but it still has some issues. There's a lot of geese that loafing on the beach, and it's been hard to discourage them. But if you want to go, if you're looking for a recreation spot, I'd really recommend Peterson Park. Always meets the E. coli standard. It's a groundwater fed lake, so that makes a difference, so groundwater versus surface runoff. And it has a lot of trees around it, so that discourages the geese. So some people get freaked out about the E. coli numbers, and I'm not going in the water, and I'm like, please do. It's not, just be aware of it, pack some hand sanitizer, try not to swallow water, but, so I think that there's sort of a middle ground between like freaking out and pretending there's not a problem, but I'll be talking more about that at my upcoming talk in February. Okay, lesson 4. Tracking progress is hard, but there are glimmers of hope. So we were always hoping to use the data that we're collecting locally for trend monitoring, and I've kind of I would caution people that it's really difficult to do that. I'm doing my best, but the issue that we run into is, since water quality is so influenced by weather, that often ends up being what drives the trends. So I'm a Chris Jones reader, and he did an analysis of rivers statewide that I found really interesting, and it was mostly bad news, but there was a glimmer of hope. The biggest improvement in phosphorus was at our own South Skunk River near Cambridge, and so I was like, oh, that's great. I want to follow up on the success story and figure out why that happened. And when I dug into it, I realized that, okay, he'd looked at the most recent 5 years of data, and you kind of expect that if you average several years together, it'll even out some of the swings, and then compared that to the rest of the record. And as we know, the South Skunk River, very high phosphorus levels, during low flow when that effluent is less diluted. And what I found is that those most recent 5 years were a lot wetter than the rest of the record. And so you end up comparing apples to oranges. 40% of the monthly samples in the previous period were collected during low flow when phosphorus was higher. Only 25% collected during low flow in the most recent period. So you're comparing dry to wet, and that's why you're seeing the improvement in phosphorus. It's also why you see a deterioration in sediment load. And this is probably what's driving some of the worsening things. So the Floyd River got wetter during that period. So, not to criticize Chris Jones, it's just this stuff is really hard. So the approach that I have taken has been to split things out by flow conditions. So here this is going to take a while to explain, but I have things color coded so that yellow is drier, dark blue is really high flow in the South Skunk, and green is kind of the middle conditions where it'd be suitable to take your kayak or canoe out. And so there was a site just upstream of Ames, Sleepy Hollow Access, kind of corresponding to what's now the headwaters of the South Skunk River Watershed Management Authority. And so DNR had been monitoring that for 40 years. That site got cut. We were able to resume monitoring it in 2020. And so we're able to do kind of a before and after comparison. And look, nitrate has decreased. But then the question is, okay, did it decrease because it's been dry recently? So we also have a site just upstream of the Ames wastewater treatment plants. Also gets water from Iowa Creek watershed, where we've done some work with farmers on cover crops and no-till bioreactor. And there wasn't enough of those practices done that I was really expecting a big difference. But we're also seeing a bit of a decrease in nitrogen there. And so what I've done here is then just pulled out, let's look at just the green. So just those kind of mid-flow conditions when it'd be good, enough water for paddling, when the tile lines are likely flowing. And so what we find is that at that upstream site, the trend disappears, but at the downstream site, it doesn't. So that's kind of an encouraging trend. That's what we'd expect if some of the practices, nutrient reduction practices in the Iowa Creek watershed and in the City of Ames have been making a difference. So I'm hoping, I have not added this year's data in. We'll see if that trend continues, but I'm hoping that this might be an approach to get around the big question of attribution, because I think this seems to be the biggest challenge, that you can go to a lot of trouble to measure how many pounds of nitrogen are coming in now this year versus last year. But if you don't know whether that's because of the cover crops or because of the rainfall, then it doesn't do you a lot of good. So I really think that we need to be focusing a little bit more on how do we tease those things out. Another encouraging trend, I looked at E. coli during the low flow conditions when you'd expect wastewater to have a bigger influence, and looked at before and after the City of Ames installed their UV disinfection system. And so upstream of Ames, don't see an improvement in E. coli, but downstream of the wastewater treatment plant see a slight improvement. So some encouraging signs. So to recap again, keep in mind these 4 lessons learned. Number 1, water pollution is highly dependent on the weather. Number 2, wastewater treatment plants don't treat everything. Number 3, the impaired waters list is the tip of a very dirty iceberg. And number 4, progress tracking is hard, but there are some glimmers of hope. I got a few upcoming events that I want to mention. If there's going to be a new draft impaired waters list coming out, and I want to talk a little bit more about what impaired really means and what people should be thinking about when they're choosing where to recreate. And so I have a talk coming up at the Older, Wiser, Livelier Seniors program, Story County Conservation, on February 1st. I've also been, as I've been building out some of these R scripts for analyzing data, I've been getting a chance to work more with groups around the state and One thing I did was look at statewide data to try to get a handle on the question of how big an influence does CAFOs really have? And I found kind of a mixed picture. So I'll present that research on March 9 at the Life in the Raccoon River Conference. April 20, if you're looking for a chance to get in the stream and make a difference, we've been partnering with Outdoor Alliance, with Story County Conservation, and with City of Ames, and with the Skunk River Paddlers to do creek cleanups twice a year. So if the weather permits, we'll get a flotilla of canoes. We'll go down either Iowa Creek or the South Skunk River, wherever we find the trash, and load up the canoes with tires and cans. So good time. So keep an eye on that. We'll be posting more details once we're able to do some scouting. And then we have this tradition of doing twice a year volunteer events in spring and fall. And lately we've been coordinating those with Polk County to get a snapshot of water quality across a bigger swath of the state. And so that'll be on Tuesday, May 21. And it can be kind of self-directed, pick up a kit and monitor as you're able. But if you have a group that is interested in learning the ropes, I can set up a training session with you. And so questions?
So let's use the mic so the people on Zoom can hear us.
Hi, quick two-part question. Your water monitoring, do you have a state-approved co-op? And the second part is, are your water monitoring results being used by the state or EPA as part of 305 D and 303B?
No. I asked them. I asked DNR, like, how do we get a quality assurance plan approved? And they're like, we won't do that. I think Polk County has done a kind of workaround to get their co-op directly approved by the EPA, but in general, there's a credible data law that prevents volunteer data, especially from being used for regulatory purposes without, so no, we're mostly collecting this for educational purposes and to guide our conservation efforts.
You showed the slide up there earlier and you went past it almost too fast for me to catch it, with when they went to the infrared technology. UV disinfection. Yeah, the UV. I'm sorry, not infrared. The UV. Was there a change very much in that afterwards? Did that make an improvement in their system? Yes,
I have seen. And this one in particular, I think, was Squaw Valley neighborhood scale system. And before, I think it was often, tens of thousands, and afterwards it was usually 10 or below the detection limit. So yeah, these things make a big difference. It's been harder to, I made an attempt to tease out the influence in the stream, but it's a little bit harder in the stream when you got a lot of things coming in and E. coli bouncing all over the place. But yeah, and I've seen, I think there isn't a lot of data for untreated effluent, but I found, a few others. Oskaloosa also is in the process of building a new plant, and they had one E. coli sample that was in the 20,000 colonies per 100 milliliters. So yeah, if you don't do this UV disinfection, it can be pretty gross.
Okay, I'll ask you another quick question. As a support organization, as part of the Outdoor Alliance of Story County that we are, what do you need to do more or to make improvements on your data collection? Is there a way to hire a professional that then would make us not be a volunteer group or anything like that? How do we make ourselves better at all of what you're doing? Any idea? Any good suggestions?
I will have to think about that.
Well, I didn't really mean it to be a trick question, but I was wondering if there was anything you had in your mind that said, boy, it'd be great if we had,
Not off the
Something.
top of my head. Anybody else in the audience have suggestions for what you think we should be doing more of?
we probably would be remiss in saying some of the things, because a lot of it, we understand why we don't have accountability, because if we don't count it from a state level, then we don't have to worry if we improved it, because we don't know what it was. And I get that as a general philosophy on decertifying Iowa water and that sort of thing. I'll try not to go beyond that.
Other questions?
Could you talk a little bit about road salt, which is obviously really relevant this time of year, and what impacts that's having?
I have not seen much impact. I think we do need to do more testing at the right times of year. There's actually Isaac Walton League has a salt watch program where you can order a set of 5 chloride strips and pledge to test before and after a winter storm. So it'd be helpful to get a little bit more data from urban creeks during those periods. But in general, I guess I have not seen very high chloride levels in most creeks, except downstream of wastewater treatment plants. And so I think that water softeners could be the bigger impact. But in general, I think we don't see chloride kind of into the danger zone that would be harmful for aquatic life. It's something to keep an eye on. I think there are, I know in the Twin Cities area, they have a lot of issues with the chloride from road salts in their lakes and creeks, but we're not quite seeing it yet. Yeah.
Does all the water go through those chutes for E. coli? All the water in the plant?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh.
and this one is a pretty small system, and then
Okay. It
yeah, you'd
looks
have a
small.
bigger bank of lights for the City of Ames.
Has their own system.
Oh,
They're not tied to Ames.
okay.
Mhm.
I'll just comment on Steve and John's questions. I remember that you were able to get the DNR to designate a section of Iowa Creek as of special concern based on some of the data.
Yes, Winnow fee. Yeah, so the water's in need of further
That's what
investigation.
it is.
So yeah, we are, and I think they're now. I've been getting requests for data when that process rolls around, and so I've given them all this, and so yeah, you may see more of this data, at least being posted on DNR's assessment database. It won't put them on the impaired list. But yeah, it potentially on this special category, this water's in need of further investigation. Now, whether there will be any further investigation, I don't know.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Where's the chunk of the stream that, is it spatially limited?
So for the assessment process, it's usually like I don't know, 2 or 5 mile stretch of creek. So I think like Iowa Creek is broken up into 2 chunks. The South Skunk River between its headwaters and Ames is maybe 4 or 5 chunks. So
How did you catch the attention of the DNR for that?
they take public comments on the impaired waters list, and so I said, hey, we have this extra data, and then after a couple rounds of that, then they now know that I have the data, and so they're being proactive and reaching out to me, so that's nice.
I have a separate question regarding phosphorus in high, middle, and low water situations. Can you explain the phosphorus the impact on phosphorus dynamics?
Sure. Yeah, so this graph is the percentage of the flow in the river from treated effluent. So, there's a whole bunch of data that's getting kind of bunched up at one end. But if the water levels in the river are really high, if you have a big rain event, there's more force of water that's potentially eroding the stream banks. There is phosphorus attached to the sediment. And I know there's been research that's found that legacy sediment, things that were, so you had erosion from the Dust Bowl maybe, and that has kind of accumulated in the stream banks, and you have all this kind of soft mud that's easily eroded. So that can be a big source of phosphorus. You can also get erosion from farm fields and construction sites during those heavy rain events. So yeah, you do see higher phosphorus during rain events. I think I had another slide in here somewhere too. Oh yeah. So yeah, in Iowa Creek, so going from, water levels were here, and then when it spiked up, went from 0.4 to 1.4, so a factor of 10 increase in phosphorus during those big storm events. So, yeah. So then, and then the other piece is then, so if you've got like 3 milligrams per liter phosphorus in the effluent, as that becomes a bigger fraction, you're going to be creeping up towards that 3 milligrams per liter.
Any other questions for Dan? I'll ask Cleo again. We don't have anyone on the chat? Okay. So with that, let's give Dan our appreciation for his data tonight. A lot of information there. Yep. That concludes our presentation for tonight. And just want to thank you again for coming out this evening. Also to make a couple comments about upcoming events that Outdoor Alliance sponsors. We have a series of winter hikes that occur on Thursdays. And the last one's coming up this Thursday, the 25th, and it will be at McFarland Park starting at 1:30 in the afternoon. And then we have a second presentation in cooperation with Ames Public Library coming up on February 29th, Leap Day, in cooperation with partnership with Friends of Ada Hayden Heritage Park. And we'll be talking about, or Wolf will be talking about the birds of Ada Hayden heritage at Ada Hayden, all the data that he collects over the year. So that's a Thursday, February 29th. Again, here at the library at 7 o'clock, both in person and via Zoom. So hope to see you back then. And if not, tune in on Zoom. So thank you.